Arizona Territory, May 1879. The sun was already brutal by mid-morning when Naomi Zeller was left behind in the desert, her skirts torn, lips cracked, and the wagon's dust cloud still drifting in the distance. She had begged them not to go. "Please, I can walk," she had said, clutching her side where the wheel had thrown her. But the two men driving the freight wagon, strangers her uncle had paid to get her to Yuma, had said she was slowing them down. They tossed her satchel beside her, muttered something about mileage, and drove off. She was 17 miles from anywhere. Naomi stared at the empty trail until her vision blurred. Her water was gone by sundown. She curled beneath a scrubby mesquite bush, heart hammering, body shaking from heat. Coyotes cried far off. She pressed her forehead to the dirt. "God," she whispered, "please do not let me die here. I have not done a single thing worth dying for." When the hooves came, she thought it was a dream. Then came the silence, and then the footsteps. He stepped into view like a shadow made real. Tall, shoulders broad, long black hair tied back. His eyes were dark and steady, scanning her with quiet care. He wore no shirt, just leather leggings and moccasins, his face painted in red across his brow, a bow slung across his back. Naomi tried to push herself up, but her arms gave out. "Please," she gasped. "Do not leave me." He knelt beside her. His hand touched her forehead, cooler than the sun, rough with calluses. His voice was low and even. "You have no water. You will die here." "I know," she whispered. Her lashes fluttered. "I think. I almost did already." He did not speak again. He lifted her gently, her head resting against his bare chest, and carried her like she weighed nothing at all. She faded in and out. The heat had hollowed her out, but she felt the strength of his arms, the rhythm of his steps, the steady beat of his heart under her cheek. When she woke again, it was night, and she was in a small shelter of stone and cloth. A fire crackled near her feet. Her lips were wet. Someone had dripped water into her mouth. The Comanche warrior sat nearby, sewing a leather strap, his hands deft and careful. His bow and arrows were laid by the wall. His eyes flicked to her, then returned to his work. Naomi tried to sit up. Pain flared in her ribs. "Lie still," he said. "What is your name?" He paused, then said, "Mekko." She swallowed. "I am Naomi." He nodded once. The silence stretched, but it was not cold. It was full of weight. He looked at her again, and she saw something steady in his gaze, something that had not flinched when he found her broken in the sand. "Why did you carry me?" Mekko looked at the fire. "I do not leave people behind." Naomi blinked. Her chest ached, but not from the ribs. She did not know why she wanted to cry just then. "I thought I was going to die." "You were," he said simply. "But you are not now." She looked around. The shelter was simple blankets stretched over carved rock, small fire pit, a pot hanging above the flames. His horse stood outside, cropping grass. "Where are we?" "2 days north of the trail." "You carried me 2 days?" He nodded. She stared at him. "Why?" Mekko's jaw shifted, but he did not meet her eyes. "You were left. I do not understand people who do that." Naomi felt the tears building again. "I do." He looked up. "My father died last year. My uncle said he would take care of me. He sold our land and sent me west to marry a man I never met." Mekko's mouth pressed tight. "The men he hired to take me. They said I was too slow, that I was not worth the delay." She stopped talking. Her voice was shaking. "And they left me." Mekko's gaze stayed on hers. "That is not your shame," he said. She blinked. Her throat burned. He stood and went to a small pouch, pulling out something wrapped in cloth. He brought it to her, 2 small cakes of corn and mesquite. "Eat." Slowly. Her hand brushed his as she took one. His fingers were warm, solid. They lingered a second longer than needed. Over the next days, she healed. Mekko said little, but she learned more from his gestures than most men's speeches. He built a frame to dry meat, showed her how to clean water with hot stones, and never once looked at her with pity. One night, as the stars blinked above, she sat beside him near the fire, wrapped in his spare blanket. He was sharpening an arrowhead. "I have never seen someone move the way you do," she said. "Like you are part of the ground itself." He looked at her. "You are not afraid of me?" She shook her head. "I was afraid of dying alone. You are the reason I did not." He met her eyes, and something passed between them. Not sudden, not loud, just steady, unspoken. "You do not have to go back," he said quietly. She stared at him. "What?" "You do not owe them anything. Not the uncle. Not the man waiting in Yuma." She swallowed hard. I have nothing, Mekko. You have breath. You have your name. You can choose something else. She looked down at her hands. What else is there for a girl left behind in the desert? He reached over, touched her wrist. You were not left. Not anymore. Naomi's breath caught. His hand stayed on her wrist. Warm. Steady. The fire cracked. The night pressed close around them. And for the first time since her father died, she felt safe. Not because she had shelter, because someone had seen her, broken and alone, and carried her to safety. And stayed. The wind shifted in the night. Naomi woke to the quiet rustle of canvas fluttering against stone. The fire had burned low, leaving only a faint orange glow. She sat up slowly, her ribs still tender, and pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Mekko was gone from his usual spot. She followed the faint sound of water and found him crouched near a shallow bend in the creek, rinsing something in the current. His hair hung loose, brushing his shoulders. Moonlight caught on his skin, the silver sheen turning him nearly spectral. She stepped closer, not wanting to startle him. Couldn't sleep? He looked over his shoulder. The wind changed. Naomi crouched beside him, the cold stone pressing through the soles of her borrowed moccasins. What does that mean? Dry air coming down from the north. Fire won't hold heat, and some animals will move early. He straightened, holding a thin strip of meat between his fingers, then laid it on a flat stone to dry. We'll need to leave by first light. Where will we go? There's a river camp 3 days from here. Some I know pass through in early summer. You'll be safer near others. Naomi nodded. The thought of more strangers made her uneasy, but she knew better than to argue. Will you stay? Mekko reached into the water again, washing his hands. For a time, she watched the rhythmic motion of his hands and the way his shoulders moved, slow and deliberate. You always live alone? He paused, then stood and wiped his hands on a strip of cloth. Not always. I left my people after my younger brother died. Her voice dropped. I'm sorry. He followed me into a raid. He was not ready. That was my doing. Mekko lifted the stone tray and turned toward camp. Since then, I keep to myself. They walked side by side through the quiet dark, the silence between them not heavy, only full. At camp, she settled back onto the bedroll. Mekko stirred the coals with a stick, coaxing a faint flame to life. Naomi watched the light flicker across his face. If you hadn't found me, would I have been buried by sand? He didn't look at her. More likely the vultures. She nodded once. Then I owe them nothing, those men. They didn't even see me as a person. You were only weight to them. He glanced at her, the firelight catching the edge of his cheekbone. But that is not what you are. She blinked, her throat tightening. What am I then? He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, someone who kept walking, even when the world wanted you gone. The next morning, she helped him pack what little they carried. He lashed the bundles neatly, checking their weight, adjusting the balance for his horse. Naomi fastened a strip of hide around her waist to hold the blanket closed as they walked. Her dress was still torn, but she didn't feel exposed not with him there. They traveled in silence for long stretches, the land rising into red stone ridges and low brush. The sun was hot, but not cruel, and Mekko paced their steps so she didn't tire too quickly. When they stopped to rest near a stand of cottonwood, Naomi sat cross-legged, pulling a splinter from her palm. You said the river camp has others. Will they know what to make of me? They'll see a woman walking beside a man who didn't let her die. Mekko crouched by a cluster of prickly pear, slicing a pad free with his knife. That will be enough. She watched him carefully scoop out the pulp and mix it with water. You always know what to do. No one knows everything, he said. But I listen. To what? The land. The animals. People who don't speak. Naomi looked at the horizon, the way the ridges melted into sky. I never learned to listen like that. You will. Their second night out, they camped near a dry arroyo. Mekko showed her how to anchor a windbreak with stones. She watched his hands, the quiet precision in his movements, and mimicked him. When he handed her a length of sinew to tie the corners, she didn't hesitate. Later, as they sat by the fire, she tugged gently at the hem of her sleeve. I don't know how to be useful. Not out here. You already are. She turned toward him. How? You don't complain. You learn. You don't ask to be carried. Naomi looked into the fire. I was raised to pour coffee and say yes. Mekko's gaze didn't move. That isn't who you are now. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, I don't want to go back to being that girl. He reached across the fire and placed something in her hand. A smooth stone, painted with a red ochre line across one side. Keep this. What does it mean? That you were seen. She closed her fingers around it, holding it to her chest. When she lay down that night, she didn't think of the men who left her. She thought of the way Mekko looked at the world, and how, slowly, she was learning to see it too. By the fourth day, Naomi's feet ached deep in the bone, but she no longer stumbled. The sun pressed down hard, but she adjusted her stride to Mekko's pace, learning how to move without wasting breath. She didn't ask how far they had left. She could read it in the way he started glancing toward the ridges more often, in the way his horse's ears pricked forward with interest. That evening, they camped in the shelter of a low cliff, the air thick with sage. Mekko gathered dry branches from a mesquite thicket while Naomi cleared a circle for the fire. Her fingers bled from stone cuts, but she didn't mention it. When he returned, he noticed anyway. "You'll need to clean those," he said, setting the wood down. "I will after supper," she replied, brushing grit from her skirt. "They're not bad." He crouched beside her, took her hands gently, and turned them palm up. His touch was careful, never assuming. He poured water from a skin, rinsed the dirt away, then pressed a poultice of crushed yucca and soft bark over the worst cut. She didn't flinch, but her breath caught when he wrapped her hand in a strip of clean cloth. "You could have let me do that myself," she said. "I know." She watched him tie the knot with practiced ease. "You always take care of people without asking first." He looked up at her. "Only the ones who don't expect it." Naomi didn't answer. Something swelled in her chest, nothing sharp, just heavy with meaning. After the fire caught, she stirred the pot while Mekko checked the sky. The smoke curled gently, carrying the scent of wild onion and rabbit. She glanced toward him as he stood against the fading light. "You said you knew some people at the river camp," she said. "Are they kin?" "No. Traders. One woman there taught me to make bows when I was younger." "You trust them?" "I trust her." Naomi shifted the pot off the flame. "If she sees me with you, will she think I'm a burden?" Mekko sat beside her, stretching his legs out. "She'll see a woman who walked farther than most would have survived." Naomi handed him a carved wooden spoon. "You always say things like that. Clean and plain. Like you've already thought it through." He tasted the stew and nodded. "Words should be used like arrows. Straight, and only when needed." She smiled, surprised by how easy it came. "I'm used to men who use them like birdshot. Loud, careless. You've met the wrong men." She looked at him across the fire. "Maybe not anymore." After they ate, Naomi stepped toward the cliff's edge, where the moon lit the wide sweep of the land below. She could see the glint of water in the far distance, not a river, but a thin stream winding through cottonwood. Mekko joined her without speaking. "I was raised thinking the world was small," she said quietly. "Just the edges of our land, the fence posts, the church bell. Everything else was danger." He rested his hand against the rock, watching the horizon. "And now, I think the danger was never the land. It was the people who taught me to fear it." Mekko didn't respond, but his eyes met hers. She stepped closer. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked. He considered it. "I believe in paths, made by choices. Some we make, some others make for us." She nodded, the wind tugging loose strands of her hair. "Then maybe this is mine. Not the one I was sent on, the one I chose after." Mekko's hand brushed hers, deliberate and slow. "Then walk it with care." She turned toward him. Her fingers intertwined with his, and he didn't pull away. They stayed like that until the moon climbed high. No rush. No need for more than what passed between them. In the morning, they walked the last stretch in silence. The land grew greener, the soil softening underfoot. Naomi spotted a pair of canvas tents staked near the river bend, smoke curling up from a cook fire. 2 horses stood tethered in the shade. A woman with a wide-brimmed hat and a thick braid down her back emerged from one of the tents, hands on her hips. Mekko raised a hand in greeting. Naomi slowed, uncertain. He turned to her. "You don't need to speak," he said. "Let them see you as you are." And she stood straight, chin lifted, as they approached. The woman who greeted them at the river camp had sharp eyes and a face too still to be called kind, but she nodded once at Mekko and stepped aside. Her name was Clara. She didn't ask Naomi for explanations, only showed them where they could pitch a lean to beneath a cottonwood and pointed out the creek's deeper bends for washing. Naomi spent the first day resting in the shade, her feet soaked in cool stream water while dragonflies darted above the surface. Mekko spoke little as usual, but he stayed close, mending the stirrup on his saddle, glancing toward her now and then. She didn't ask what he was thinking. She'd learned to wait. By the second evening, Clara brought her a needle and a roll of coarse thread. "I saw you eyeing that tear in your skirt," the woman said. "You've got hands. Use them." Naomi took the offering without hesitation. "Thank you. I don't expect thanks. Just don't waste the thread." She sat by the firelight and stitched slowly, her fingers still raw from the journey. Mekko returned from fishing with a string of trout and crouched beside her while she worked. "She trusts you," Naomi said, nodding toward Clara's tent. "She respects work," Mekko answered. Naomi looked down at her stitching. "And what do you respect?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, those who don't run from pain." She tied off the thread. "I used to think pain was something you had to hide. Keep quiet about." Mekko ran a stone along the blade of his knife. "That's how it grows." Later that night, Naomi walked the edge of the camp, where the river lapped against its banks in slow rhythm. She found Clara seated on a flat boulder, skinning a rabbit with practiced flicks of her wrist. "You always live out here?" Naomi asked. Clara didn't look up. "Only place I've ever been left alone." Naomi sat on the ground beside her. "I used to think quiet was loneliness. Now I'm not so sure." Clara peeled the last bit of hide free. "Loneliness is when someone's near and still doesn't see you. Quiet's just a place without shouting." Naomi said nothing for a while. Then, "Did you ever stop trusting people?" Clara's knife paused. "I stopped expecting them to be better than they are." "That sounds like giving up." "No," Clara said, wiping her blade. "It's knowing who's worth the risk. You're walking beside one who is." Naomi turned toward the tents. Mekko was feeding small strips of dried meat to his horse, his silhouette framed against the low moon. She didn't sleep that night. Not from fear or discomfort, but from something stirring deep in her chest, something that had no name yet. When the sky began to pale, she stepped outside and found him already awake, sitting on a low rock near the creek. He didn't turn when she approached, but she sat beside him anyway. "I don't want to leave this place," she said. "You don't have to." She looked at him, his face drawn quiet in the morning light. "Would you stay?" His gaze moved to hers. "If you ask me to." Naomi brushed her fingers along her forearm, chasing the chill from the air. "I never thought I'd have the right to ask someone for anything again. Not after everything was taken. You do now." His voice was low, steady. He wasn't offering comfort. He was offering truth. She spoke without looking away. "Then I want you to stay. With me." Mekko reached for her hand, not with urgency, but with a calm certainty that settled deep in her ribs. Their fingers laced together, firm and warm. "I already have," he said. And in the hush of that dawn, beneath the cottonwoods and beside the slow-running river, they sat with the kind of stillness that had nothing to do with silence. It was a stillness earned, chosen. Naomi leaned against him, her head resting just beneath his shoulder. He didn't speak again, and neither did she. There was nothing left that needed saying. Naomi woke to the scent of juniper smoke and the soft hush of a blade passing through leather. Mekko was seated near the fire, shaping a new sheath. His movements were quiet, focused, but when she sat up, he glanced back and nodded. She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "I want to learn." He set the leather aside. "Learn what?" "All of it," she said. "What you know. How you live." He studied her for a long beat, then reached for a second strip of hide and handed her a bone awl. By midday, her hands were blistered and her stitches crooked, but she didn't stop. Mekko didn't correct her, just watched, offered a nod when she adjusted her grip, said nothing when she bled through the cloth on her palm. When the sun reached its highest point, Clara brought them dried peach slices and a tin pot of coffee boiled dark and bitter. "You're staying, then," Clara said without preamble. Naomi looked across the fire at Mekko, who was testing the fit of the new sheath. "Yes," she said. "We are." Clara grunted. "Good. The camp could use hands that don't waste work." Later, while Mekko was away checking the fish traps downstream, Naomi walked with Clara along the riverbank. They gathered long reeds for basket weaving, their arms brushing the stalks aside with a soft swish. "You ever think about going back east?" Clara asked, tying reeds into a tight bundle. Naomi shook her head. "There's nothing there for me now." "Some folks would still chase it," Clara said. "What they lost, even if it was never really theirs." Naomi bent to cut a reed. "I used to think my whole life was behind me, but it was just what someone else decided for me." Clara didn't respond, only handed her another length of twine. That night, Naomi and Mekko sat beside the fire, her stitching in her lap, his hands wrapped around a wooden bowl of broth. A coyote called out in the distance, lonesome but not threatening. "I've been thinking," she said, watching the flames curl upward. "We could build something here. Something that's ours." Mekko stirred the broth with his spoon. "You mean to stay through the seasons?" She nodded. "We could plan along the river once the frost breaks. Chickens, maybe. A shelter better than canvas and branches." He turned, his eyes on hers. "You want a home? I want a life that holds." He reached across the fire, his fingers brushing hers. "Then we'll build it." In the weeks that followed, they worked without ceremony. Mekko bartered with Clara for tools and seed. Naomi learned to stretch hides, dye cloth with crushed berries, twist cord strong enough to bind bundles. She never asked to be spared the harder tasks hauling water, digging post holes, and Mekko never offered. When the first spring rain came, Naomi stood barefoot beneath the downpour, head tipped back, laughter rising up from a place in her she hadn't felt in years. Mekko watched her from under the awning, his expression unreadable. "You're not coming out?" she called. He stepped into the rain slowly, his hair plastering to his face. She ran to him, water sheeting down their skin, and when she reached out, he caught her hand and pulled her close. They stood forehead to forehead, their breath warming the space between them. "You're not afraid anymore," he said. "I'm not alone anymore." He kissed her, then not sudden, not hesitant. Just sure. And when she kissed him back, it was with everything she had left, everything she'd gathered in the silence, the long miles, the rebuilding. The seasons passed. The shelter became a cabin, low and sturdy, with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. Naomi painted the door red with crushed clay and oil. Mekko carved the beams with patterns from his youth and taught her their meanings. By the second year, they had chickens, a small patch of beans, and a dog that followed Naomi like a shadow. Clara came down twice each month with trade goods, but never stayed long. She always left with something Naomi had made: baskets, dried herbs, strips of tanned hide. One evening, as the last light faded behind the hills, Naomi sat on the porch step, her back resting against Mekko's leg. He ran his fingers through her hair, slow and steady. "I want to give you something," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "My name. Or rather the name I choose now." Naomi Zeller was someone they could abandon. "I want something of my own. Something from here." Mekko thought for a moment. Then he leaned down and said a word in Comanche, soft against her ear. She turned to look up at him. "What does it mean?" "River-rooted." She smiled, tears prickling her eyes. "Yes. That's right." Years later, no one called her Naomi Zeller anymore. She was the woman who stitched rawhide with a steady hand, who grew onions and squash in the dry soil, who knew the river's moods and the way her husband's eyes warmed when he watched her work. Together, they built not just a home, but a life held in quiet strength. There were no bells or declarations, no grand promises. Just each day woven into the next, a life chosen, not given. And when they sat at night, her head resting against his shoulder, the stars wheeling above them, there was nothing left they needed to say. They had done what they came to do. They had found their way home.